Listen, I'm just some guy just like everybody else. I got laundry that I gotta fold. I got coffee cups that I gotta wash. But how about let me help you with that? You do your chores, just throw in some earbuds and listen to a story. Here we go. Today, Today was a special day indeed on Babylon, as it was the sixth birthday of 14 Nebulan children. A Nebulan sixth birthday is significant because that is when they reach flight maturity. It must also be said that the Nebulans measure time in a much elongated fashion than all other beings in the cosmos. The 20 Nebulans had in fact been living on Babylon for 6 silicon decay cycles, or approximately 900 years. The only two who may have had the answers as to why time disparity might be the Mason or his cousin Doug. The 6 Nebulan adults spent their recent days, weeks, and months training each child on flight theory, thrust calculation, stance and form, safety partners, orbit patterns, and finally interplanetary navigation. Finally, all 14 children were successful with high-speed flight. Then, Seraphim, Sebastian, Remington, Kensington, Arabella, and Percival presented 7 planetary maps, one to each twin set for navigational ease. The adults had explored and charted everything on these maps themselves. The children were very grateful and expressed as much to each of the adults. Rules were established for the first off-planet flight. 6 adults and 7 sets of twins meant that one set of twins would have to wait their turn for lack of a chaperone. Sticks were gathered and drawn, causing Talia and Tiana to stay back and wait. While they waited, they studied their new planetary map and asked each other silly questions about different planet names. "Look," said Tiana, "ear." Talia looked puzzled and said, "That's crazy. Who names a planet after an ear?" Tiana pointed at the map in surprise, saying, "Look, there's a note. It says similar to Babylon." "Let's go now while no one is looking," said Talia. "Oh, I do want to see it," said Tiana. The girls folded away the map, took form, and broke the atmosphere towards Earth. Hurtling through the blackness of outer space, they soon saw a small blue dot. Nodding to each other, they stayed on course and increased speed. Choosing the most interesting piece of soil to land on, a boot-shaped, they landed next to an ancient oak tree as they slowed and touched down. Upon landing, they noticed a curious being, a human being, speaking to himself while he was asleep. Talia and Tiana studied their environment, the enormous, lush garden, the huge mezzanine, and the expansive building. "Weasels glow up, weasels blow up," said the sleeping man. This was a bit much for their first trip away, so the twins took form and headed back to Babylon. Snorting and rubbing his face while waking, the director said, "What a strange dream with strange little girls." Dahlia and Giselle arrived. Next scene. Dahlia and Giselle arrived at Pub on the Island with a direct mindset to take a bold initial meeting here with the Weasel characters. These 2 well-dressed foxwomen marched directly for the bartender once inside the pub. "What'll it be, ladies?" asked the robotic skinker. "Information," replied Giselle. "What do I look like, a quiz show host?" retorted the robotic tapster. Suddenly, 10 wrapped bundles of Earth currency in century notes were in a tidy and exact stack on top of the bar, in plain sight of every patron present. Ladies, said the robotic bartender. "Please tell me you're not trying to bribe this establishment." Dahlia leaned well over the bar, lifted and reset the robotic tapster's bowler hat on his head, cocked it at an angle, now with a little extra smoke in her voice, and said, "You misunderstand us, friend. We represent Foundry Inc., and this money is simply the price of 2 old-fashions you are about to begin mixing for us, right? Besides, everyone knows that talking with bartenders never cost anyone anything. The robotic barkeep began opening bottles, using small measuring cups, pouring liquids into a shaker, and finally presenting the 2 drinks to the fox women. After a few sips each, Dahlia and Giselle presented the robotic bottle jockey pressed the robotic bottle jockey for the whereabouts of the 3 weasels seen here last week drinking with an old man. Your query contains a logical error, said the robotic bartender. Launching herself bodily over the whole bar without touching the top, Dahlia whispered to the robotic tapster, "What did you just call us?" "The Weasel brothers are not found. They find you," and the robotic bottle jockey said as it straightened its bowler hat. Dahlia and Giselle looked at each other, began laughing out loud, and in unison said, "Really?" "I can prove it," said the robotic barkeep as he was now drying glassware with a towel. "Oh, please do," replied Giselle. The robotic tapster set down a glass and picked up another, saying, "Turn around." A voice from behind the foxes rolled up, over, and through them that sounded like a warm breeze wafting across the top of an open jar of molasses that said, "Well, well, well, ain't you just like angels, gifts fallen from heaven? Don't you know if you dames need medical attention after that fall from the sky?" Standing behind Dahlia and Giselle were Think and Thank Weasel, who were still on errand duty for Dunk. The foxes were immediately smitten by their criminal ruggedness. Dahlia clumsily backed over to the correct side of the bar, saying, "Oh, I'm such a mess." "Doll, if that's a mess, I couldn't stand to see you clean," replied Thank Weasel. The quartet made their way to the Weasel's table in the back, where friendships and business were galvanized. Next scene. Several weeks later at Foundry Inc., the head engineer of research and development, Ocean, a silicon-based life form, was very excited this particular morning. Ocean was walking the labyrinth of corridors from the R&D to the director's office with a box containing the newest fully functional toy to submit for the director's approval. As Ocean reached the main reception, Ophelia looked up from her crossword at Ocean and said, "Good morning, dear. How are you?" "I'm great, Ophelia. Thank you. I have a new toy for Crispin," said Ocean, slightly raising the box he was carrying. Ophelia smiled and said, "That's the ticket, Ocean. That old goat has been down in the dumps for weeks now. Just scan your ID marker, please." Still holding the box, Ocean moved one arm near the scanner, and his forearm began to morph and flex over the lens of the scanner. The light signaled green, and Ophelia buzzed him through. Ocean smiled as he walked and carried the box through more purposefully confusing corridors until finally he arrived at the office door of Dahlia and Giselle. Having knocked and been let in, the fox women asked Ocean for a sneak peek of the new toy, to which he was glad to offer a short demonstration. Once satisfied, the girls rang the director and opened the office to the next. Ocean was greeted to a very excited old goat indeed. "My toy maker! Ocean, what have you for me today?" "Please have a seat, sir." The director climbed into his leather high-backed chair and observed with great anticipation as Ocean carefully explained every detail about this yet unnamed device that could change anyone's appearance from their own to another's and back again. This, quote, forearm touchscreen pad could add freckles, a single mole, make you look like another person completely, give you the appearance of any animal, vegetable, mineral, alien species, and it had an unlimited lifetime battery that worked in conjunction with the body's own unique electrical system. This forearm touchscreen pad even syncs with your memories, allowing you to change into people from your past. What a marvelous device! The director was overjoyed and eager to play with this new toy. Ocean helped the director affix the forearm touchscreen pad, accepted the director's gratitude, and then helped the old goat into the mezzanine and then the garden. The director immediately frolicked his way across the garden to the massive oak tree. Ocean rang Ophelia from the desk, saying, "He's in the garden." "Thank you, Ocean." Ocean then took his cardboard box and headed back to the R&D lab. Next scene. Today was exploratory flight day on Babylon, and it was again Talia and Tiana's turn to wait behind for lack of a flight chaperone. Once everyone had left, the girls wasted absolutely no time consulting their planetary map for Earth. The map was neatly folded away, flight stances were taken, and the twins broke the atmosphere of Babylon. Hurtling through the blackness of outer space, they sped up as soon as they saw the small blue dot. Navigating the atmosphere, they located their favorite patch of soil, the boot, went into a dive bomb, only to pull out of it the last second and executed a very gentle landing, disturbing no dust. The twins were met with the same sleeping man from before, except he was awake and running around the oak tree, acting very strange indeed. First the man looked like himself, then a large bird, then himself, but with green skin. The twins took form and broke Earth's atmosphere. Next scene. Thunk Weasel had now successfully integrated the radioactive plutonium fuel cell into the antique twin prop plane, and thanks to Thunk's surprise, he had an overabundance of power. Naturally, Thunk began building additions to the interior cabin for comfort. He installed fully adjustable heated seats, self-cooling cup holders, paw and nail grooming stations, and a long list of more extraneous features that were completely unnecessary, but also completely awesome. Thank Weasel was again seated at the table with a box of toothpicks and also an empty glass. Thank was on the verge of a breakthrough with the aerodynamics of spinning and cartwheeling aerial toothpick tricks. He had already gone through the entire box twice and repacked it again each time in an attempt to perfect these tricks. The brotherly competitive nature was strong with the middle weasel. Thank took a deep breath and placed one toothpick 2/3 out from the front edges of his teeth. Using a Spanish language rolled R, and with his tongue quickly closing his lips, he blew gently. The toothpick took flight in a tight spiral, indeed landed in the center of the empty glass and clinked on the edges until it came to a rest. Thank now took a second toothpick and placed it 2/3 out from the front edges of his teeth, performed a tongue maneuver that was barely perceptible, which caused the toothpick to spin, cartwheeling fixed in midair on an invisible axis. Thank chomped the air and caught the toothpick perfectly, 2/3 out from the front edges of his teeth. Thunk set a glass of water down on the table and slowly clapped his huge padded paws. Thunk grabbed Thank's collar and whispered something inaudible. Thank lightly dusted and straightened Thunk's coat and said, "Forget about it." Thank smiled with an angled toothpick hanging out of the corner of his mouth while saying, "Besides, our brother is, how do we say, old school. And I have a vision to make things better for weasels for generations to come." Thank slapped Thunk's furred face. Thunk returned the slap so powerfully that Thank stumbled to the floor of the cave. Both brothers laughed uncontrollably as Thunk helped Thank up. Suddenly, Thank walked into the cave and and all he could see was horseplay. "Hey, what did I tell you about roughhousing in the cave? What do you think would happen if you mooks bumped Gramps' old stash of nitro?" Thank did have a valid point. Thunk went back to the antique twin prop plane, and Thank sat down again at the table pretending to be terribly inept at toothpick tricks. The Weasel brothers' grandfather, Erasmus Weasel, had been a master chemist and with special interest in nitroglycerin. The boys had in their possession 10 large glass jugs with cork stoppers that each held a volume of 5 liters full of nitroglycerin. Fresh nitroglycerin is colorless and with a slightly oily sheen. Erasmus's nitroglycerin was now stale and unstable with minute crystalline structures in the liquid. In this elevated hazardous state, the volatile substance could be triggered by a shock load impact matching that of a baseball catcher catching a fastball. Ironically, the Weasel's cave was directly under pub on the island, a high traffic spot for tourists. Who would have ever guessed that there was 50 liters of stale nitroglycerin in a plutonium-powered biplane in the basement? Next scene. On Babylon, the out-of-bounds had been clearly defined and agreed upon by all 20 Nebulans. Next, the safe point was established as the large boulder that separated the forest from the field. The morning breeze was moderate, warm, and almost sounded like music flowing through the trees. A strong voice rang out, 18, 19, 20, ready to fly, here I come. Percival spun around from the safe boulder, took form, and turned into a red streak. 20 Nebulans, including 14 squealing voices, had just started a game of high-speed flight and seek. This game would take 3 days to complete and would create memories no one would soon forget.